Alright, I've set up a new painting. I've drawn and taped it to the desk. And I'll just show you a few of the things that we're going to use to do the picture. So I've got a metal palette. You can ask me for the brands of these and that, I can tell you. Watercolor pan set. And these are the brushes that I'm liking at the moment. Some are cheap, none of them are super expensive. I don't really buy expensive brushes. Absolutely love this brush, use it for a lot of my washes. Just looks cool as well. So that's a nice brush. 2 things of water, 2 glasses, tissues, just in case you make a mistake and you need to remove that colour straight away before it dries. And I'll show you the picture. I don't know if this is going to pick up. It's a fish, and on its little fin at the back I've drawn a lantern. The purpose of this video is to bring texture into our picture using watercolour, and also to practice with colours and develop a nice colour scheme as a colour study. This is my 7th watercolour video now, and I hope you guys have been enjoying the other ones that I've released, and there'll be plenty more to come in the future. So let's continue on with this one. Okay, so you saw me painting the yellow and a bit of orange around this lantern. I've kept a little bit of a space in between the actual sketch and the white of the paper, which will stay like that. And now I'm going to fill in the rest of the background. I'm going to use one of my favourite colours, cobalt turquoise. That's a beautiful colour. I've got it in this cute little 5mm tube, which looks pretty hilarious. That background colour that I'm applying has a few other colours mixed in with that cobalt turquoise. So if you're wondering why it looks a little bit more green there, that's because I've added in some other colours. But as you can see, I'm using quite a small brush to apply that background colour, and I would suggest not doing that if you want a nice smooth finish, but since the point of the video is to create mood and texture in our painting, I'm using that smaller brush to develop some of those patterns and bleed marks. Just using my beloved big brush there. It's gonna make that area a little bit more even, but you're still definitely gonna see that texture showing through. Alright, I'm pretty happy with the background now. I've got a bit of a transition happening around this main light source. As you can see, I've got a bit of texture happening through here where the watercolour has bled into itself. In this picture, I wanted that because it kind of provides more mood. It's a point of interest really, and I think it kind of goes well with the underwater theme. For example, you can see here where I've got that masking fluid blob and you have this patterned flaring out around it. Well, that was created because when the water and pigment was brushed over that knob, a little bit of water pooled around it, and then this area of paint around it dried quicker than the pooling area, and then that's caused it to bleed back into the dried areas, causing that textured pattern. And if you didn't want that and you wanted this transition from the light source to be perfect, seamless without any of these textures, especially around these areas you can see here, the best way to approach that is make sure that your paper is quite damp to start with, so you can get some just clean water and brush it over, and then you can sort of dab it with a paper towel or tissue if you want to make sure it's not too wet, and then come in with your colours and slowly blend them in towards where the light is, and then that pretty much avoids that. And the other thing you do to really make sure that you get it perfect is mask out, probably not with masking fluid because the area is too big, but mask it out with some tape or whatever you want to use, and then brush your colour across the whole thing and then blend it in from there. I have done that on other works before, and then you get a really perfect look, but I think for this particular picture I didn't mind if I was going to get that sort of textured bleeding patterns happening. In this case it actually makes it look better. These are only ever created by wet paint bleeding back into the dried paint, so keep that in mind. Just make sure that the base colour you're putting down also works with the colours that you're going to apply over the top. I plan on using an orange on the fins on this fish, so I definitely wouldn't paint in those stripes as orange, because if you were to put a blue like I'm going to do over the top of that, it's not going to be a very nice look. So really think about your colours and whether they do actually work on top of each other, because that base colour is always going to show through. That's the beauty of watercolour. It's just an extra step to think about, really. As you can see, we are starting to develop some nice textures. As we saw before, we've got that nice texture happening around this lamp, and in the fish, first we painted in those bands, and then we came back over with the blue. We've got a nice transition happening there, but we've kept some of that pattern, some of those drying stains, I guess. And then here, you can see that blue that we washed over this bottom section, and I've kept some of those sweeping lines going through there, and then that sort of emphasizes that curve of the fish. So little subtleties like that can really help. I made sure to leave a little bit of that really vibrant pink showing through. Whenever I do paintings, I always leave some edges on things, and that just, it gives it more depth without really adding any detail. You can see here there's the lighting, so we've got that happening there, and then the whole picture is going to be built around that. There is a bit of a light happening here, which will keep this back section of the fish a little bit lighter. Mostly is coming from above. So we've got to develop this bottom section of the fish, and we're going to keep a bit of light happening on this bottom edge. That's that radiated light that's coming up from underneath. The next step, we'll start to darken in these bands. They kind of look like they stick out too much, so what we need to do is we need to sort of darken this bottom section to drop it back in so that it looks like it actually follows the contours of the fish, not just floating out in space away from it, because this colour band on this particular fish goes into the fin, but we need to make it more obvious that the belly of the fish here is rounded. So that's what we're going to do, and follow along. So if you get any really sharp lines that you may not want, like this one, it's a bit too bold there. So the best way to deal with that is to get your brush, lightly dampen it, and then just rub that edge. And then you can do the last step, which is just pull any of that paint away with the tissue, and that's it. That looks a lot smoother now. Alright. There I'm just applying some water to those areas, and that's going to allow the paint to bleed over the surface and create some pretty random and interesting textures. And then from there I'll build the details on top of them. Alright, before we finish up the picture, I just wanted to show you this. And what this is it's a laminated piece of paper that has all the wrappers from my watercolor pan set, which is this one over here. And I've stuck them to this piece of paper for a very particular reason, and I'll show you why. So you finish your colour study and you're loving the colours that you've come up with, and that's what I use this for. This is the exact layout of my pan set. If I used, these aren't the exact colours, but for example, if I use this one, and this one on this piece, I can easily refer to that later. And it's great if you're not going to finish your picture all in one day. This one I finished this one in one day. But this is particularly helpful if you're going to come back to the piece in, say, a week's time. You don't want to forget what paints you used. Well, because this is the same layout as your pan, you can just count in, 1, 2, 3 in from the right, and you know that that's that colour you used. And you can write some additional notes. Maybe you used a different brand, a Daniel Smith Rose Madder. You can write that underneath as a note. And because it's laminated, you can easily just rub it off. I don't have a whiteboard marker, that's probably be better. This is just a highlighter, but still comes off. If you want to keep it in a permanent record, in a file somewhere, you can also, while it's nice and clean, you can put that through your photocopier and photocopy it and then write on that permanently. but for something you're just using to remind yourself next time, instead of wasting the paper, it's good to have something that's laminated. This is what I meant by the same layout as the pan. So I use that colour, 3 in, 1, 2, 3. That's that orange there, so you know. So hopefully that's a helpful tip for you. May not work in your particular workflow, but I've always found it to be quite handy. Alright, our picture is all finished. We've kept some of those nice textures, and I think it's been a pretty successful colour study. I really appreciate anyone who has watched this video through. Coming up on the screen soon will be some other videos I've previously done. You can check those out if you want. But until next time, thank you very much for coming and visiting. Bye.